Well, hi there. Thank you so much for making the time to be here. My name is Jonathan Foust, and welcome to this short meditation and Dharma talk on preconceptions and myths about meditation. Before we launch into all this, though, first of all, again, thank you for being here. Some acknowledgments. Rita Moran, our mindful movement teacher, who leads mindful movement at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, which takes you right up to this meditation and talk. So please feel free. There's the link to her Zoom class is on my Facebook page and on my website. Also, a big thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting this, to Glenn Harrison, our producer. I do have a mailing list if you're interested. Every couple of months, I send out a compendium of talks with my best photography. And there is a weekly also, if you're interested. All my talks are online: YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Amazon, the whole thing. So feel free to avail yourself there. And just to say thank you for your support. This is all offered in the spirit of generosity, the whole spirit that no one is ever denied access to these teachings if they're interested. So no fee, no charge, no ads. And if you'd like to support this, thank you. I appreciate it. You can do that via my website as well. I think that's it in terms of announcements and so forth. We are going to explore tonight some of the preconceptions and myths about meditation. But before we do that, let's actually do a meditation. There's so many ways that you can train your attention. And one of the ways that I find helpful, which I keep coming back to again and again in my own life, is this whole idea of focus and flow and letting go, using concentration to arrive, accessing the witness or the observer to notice what's changing and to let it be, and ultimately to let everything be just as it is, that quality of letting go and surrendering to the present moment. So, to begin, you might like to close your eyes. Please feel free if that would be helpful. Usually it's helpful to close your eyes. And you might let your body move and shift and sway, anything that you might need to do to help you arrive a little bit. Could you adjust your posture in any way that would support you for the next, let's say 12 and a half minutes of sitting? Part of the key to this practice is around cultivating non-judging present moment awareness. So let's start with present moment awareness. Let the judging be there. But you might like to, right now, just take a few moments and shift your attention to your breathing. Where do you feel your breath the most predominant right now? And is it possible, let's just say for the next 3 breaths, how much can you relax and soften? How intimately can you feel the breath? And now you might explore shifting your attention to your breathing, to the sounds around you. How intimately can you be aware of all the sound vibrations that are happening in real time? Now you might shift your attention to the felt sense of your right hand from the inside out, the palm, the thumbs, the fingers. Is it possible to relax and feel and sense maybe subtle energy, or maybe even the pulse or tingling or vibration? Again, just happening in real time. Cultivating present moment awareness is aided by relaxing and softening. So you might like to explore feeling your forehead smooth, softening the muscles around your eyes. Feeling your face expressionless. Could you relax and soften your arms? Can you feel the weight and the heaviness of your arms? Could you relax the backs of the hands? And feel the volume of your hands from the inside out. Is it possible to relax or soften your belly? And you might notice the more you relax, the more subtly you can feel the movement of the belly as you breathe. It's rising on the in-breath and falling on the out-breath. Can you feel from the inside out the length and the weight and the volume of your legs? The soles of the feet and the heels. Is it possible now to sense from the crown of the head down through the soles of the feet and the heels? Is there anything right now that could relax or soften or let go inside? And sensing this quality of relaxing, of softening, you might very gently direct your attention to one of these anchors, perhaps where you feel the breath right now on the inside. You might choose the anchor of sound vibrations, the real-time sounds as they're happening right now. Some find it helpful to turn attention or rest attention in this feeling in the palms, the sense of pulse or tingling or vibration or subtle energy. And for these next minutes, when you elect to focus on one of these anchors, breath or sound or feeling, just simply notice when the mind wanders, as it normally will, how in that moment, without any judgment, you might bring your attention to the direct experience on the inside. This breath, these sounds, this felt sense in the palms. Where is your attention right now? If you're lost in a thought bubble, is it possible to redirect your attention, to sense how intimately you can experience your point of focus right now? And you might sense who you are as the observer of everything that's happening right now. Noticing what's changing, noticing your relationship to what's changing, the movement of the mind to either grasp or push away. What does it mean to be aware of all of this without judgment? Sensing who you are as the open monitor of all this phenomena. Is it possible to be aware of your anchor of breath or sound or feeling and simultaneously be aware of what's changing? You may notice that there is a quality of effort in this practice. Again and again, returning back to your anchor. There's also a quality here of noticing. And yet another quality of allowing. And you might explore now, in this remaining little bit of time left, to soften any sense of doing and sense if you can incline your mind more toward this quality of letting be, letting go. No need to control, but simply to be awake and aware of what's here. Everything changes by itself. No effort required. You might now begin to deepen your breath. Let your body move and adjust and change. Take all the time you need for your transition. Now, as you're ready, you can open your eyes or remain with them closed. And welcome back. This old classic story of these two middle-aged guys who are chatting about their family. One fellow asks the other, "How's your son doing? He's in college, isn't he?" The other fellow says, well, he's taking a year off. He goes, wow, taking a year off? He goes, yeah, he wants to learn meditation. So he's going to study meditation for this next year. His friend shrugs and says, well, at least he's not sitting around doing nothing. You know, as popular as meditation has become, there are so many myths and preconceptions about meditation. And I thought it might be interesting to take a look at some of these. I think for those of us who have a regular meditation practice, they might seem kind of obvious, but I feel there's always some elements to reinforce your practice. And perhaps this will be helpful when you're supporting people who are interested in meditation as well. What I'd like to talk about is this idea that meditation is first kind of a quick fix. I'm laughing. The idea that meditation is about emptying the mind, that it's a way to escape reality, and finally, there's one best technique that rules them all. So this whole idea is meditation a quick fix. And again, when we have no idea what meditation is, there's this idea of like, oh, there's some cosmic place I'm going to access when I meditate. And I think there are two reference points I'd like to share with you. The first reference point is a quote by Ram Dass, and you may be familiar with Ram Dass. Probably one of the most impactful spiritual teachers, certainly in the West. He was instrumental for me. When I was in graduate school, I read his book, Grist for the Mill, and just changed my life. I just knew my life was going to be different after reading that book. So Ram Dass said toward the end of his life, he said, you know, after a life dedicated to waking up, after studying meditation and being a meditation teacher and doing lots of retreats, after doing tons of therapy and being a therapist, after doing lots of chemical research, I have come to realize that here at the end of my life, I'm as neurotic as I've ever been. But now I'm friends with them. That kind of says it all. I could probably end the talk right now. The other reference point I'd like to share with you is something I understand that Pema Chodron talked about. Pema Chodron has had an active meditation practice, been again, a very, very influential teacher. I believe she's in her 80s now. And she mentioned how she was always jealous of people who had breakthroughs. And she said, I've never had a breakthrough. But it's only when I look back and I realize that my life has been more a process of gradual awakening. And I love that. I have had some breakthroughs, but there are lots of times when I think I'm not having any breakthroughs. And oftentimes I'll ask people who have a meditation practice, who are kind of down around their practice or frustrated. I'll ask them, compared to 6 months ago, do you feel more or less awake? And I find that oftentimes people will say, from that perspective, yeah, I feel a little more free. There's a great story of someone asked the Buddha, how can I tell my practice is improving? I thought, what an awesome question. How can you tell? Because it's a gnarly question. How do you know you're actually making any progress in your practice? And the Buddha allegedly said, are you more or less caught in greed, fear, and delusion? That's a really powerful question. So my question for you is, when you look back, compare yourself to 6 months ago, are you more or less free of greed, of hatred, aversion, anger, judgment, blame, or delusion, believing things are true when they're not? One of the things that occurs when you have a meditation practice is that you will experience moments of clarity. There will be moments when the clouds fall away and there's this incredible sense of presence, of possibility, of wakefulness, of an open heart. And then it'll fade. It's one of the most frustrating elements of meditation, is when you have a moment of real freedom, a a moment of spaciousness, a moment of happiness. And then afterward, there can be this sense of, where did it go? How did I blow it? This was such a big issue for me in my decades of immersion in practice and living in intentional community. That when I would have moments of clarity followed by the general muddiness of life, I would assume I had screwed things up. But the truth is, you cannot make clarity happen. You cannot make insights happen. But you can cultivate the most optimal inner space for them to arise on their own. And these are really the elements of mindfulness. Present moment awareness, shifting your attention from future and past to here and now. Second is non-judging awareness. Is it possible to observe who you are without judgment? And being receptivity. Being receptivity. Well, being receptivity, being receptive. Just receiving the moment as it is. These are so gosh darn simple, but they're so profound. Present moment awareness, suspended between past and future. A mind that is not judging. A mind that is receptive. These are the elements that allow us to step outside the linear mind and back to this sense of here and now. So here's a quick Zen pop quiz for you. If you like, you can close your eyes or don't. Can you sense right now, just maybe a glimpse, who are you in the absence of wanting? Who are you in the absence of hatred or judgment or ill will? Who are you in the absence of confusion or delusion? Just experiencing intimately right now this breath as it is. These sounds exactly as they are. These three marks of the mind. Sometimes they're referred to as the three poisons of the mind. The mind lost in greed, wanting, fantasy, clinging. The mind caught in hatred, aversion, ill will, judgment, blame. The mind caught in delusion of believing things are true when they're not. When these fall away, interesting stuff starts to manifest in your life. And I find for myself that a meditation practice for me has two elements. One is what I call maintenance. Maintenance meditation is about releasing enough stress to be able to get through the day and feel some equanimity at the end of the day. The other form of practice is transformational practice, which is usually more prolonged, more intense, more focused. It's about removing external distractions and really drilling down and being present in the moment. And typically for me, this is on retreat or when I have the discipline to keep a practice alive at home. But the truth is, when you sit down with an intention to be fully present in the here and now, you're going to notice how you're not. You're going to notice everything that pulls your mind away from the here and now. And this can be really disconcerting. And for many people, when they start practice, they have no idea how out of control their mind is. I know for myself, when I first started my first retreat, I actually thought I was kind of going insane. And I realized, no, I'm just sort of noticing the nature of the mind. My mind, but the mind. And when you start to practice, you're going to notice more and more the wanting mind that is never satisfied, the aversive mind, which is constantly pushing you to self-preservation and pushing threats away, and the deluded mind, believing things are true when they're not, or believing things are true when they are. So this is not a quick fix. Think of it as a marathon and not a sprint. When you want to be free, you will encounter what is not free. There's a classic story from the Buddha's day, which I'll probably butcher in giving you a summary. But it's someone who, and again, you have to stretch your awareness here a little bit around believing in incarnation. But in this particular story, this person, or one of the disciples or one of the followers of the Buddha, in former life had been a thief and had been a murderer. And he started a practice because he realized that there was a certain salvation in cultivating present moment awareness. And he went through a lot of suffering due to his past actions. So, and over time, just to say, he became more free. So depending on your karma, your practice may be more of a gradual awakening with occasional insights or glimpses, maybe more dramatic. Who knows? But it really is about suspending awareness and opening more and more to the here and now and cultivating this quality of non-judging awareness. Another myth of meditation is that it has something to do with emptying the mind and having no thoughts. I can't help but smile at this one. I remember when I got initiated into transcendental meditation when I was 15, my father gave it a try. My dad, really smart guy, college professor, he tried this form of mantra meditation and he just got super frustrated. And he said, this doesn't work. My mind won't stop. And the truth is, if you believe that meditation is about having no thoughts, you might be setting yourself up for some serious challenges in your life. When you watch the movement of your mind, and you think back to where your mind went, it's like looking at your web browser. This kind of random firing, free association of the mind. It's horrifying when I look at my YouTube history when I'm tired. Ramana Maharshi described the mind as a drunken monkey stung by scorpions. And that's pretty much a really good description of my mind. Simply lurching around from here to there, distracted by shiny objects. So how do you work with a mind that is kind of out of control? Someone estimated we think about 50,000 thoughts a day. I think that's about right. I haven't counted exactly, but it doesn't surprise me. I've noticed most of mine are repeats. And on a meditation retreat, oftentimes we'll suggest trying to identify your top 10. The top 10 stories that keep circulating through your mind. But the really cool thing here is when you begin to watch the mind, just observe the mind doing what the mind does. When you shift to the observer, you are beginning to sever your identification with the thinking process and observe the thinking process. More on this later. But the thing is, and this hits me every time I do a meditation retreat, I do not have to believe every thought. The mind is simply a prediction machine, a story-making machine. It secretes thoughts. And inevitably, when you practice meditation, you will begin to recognize how much you are identified with your thoughts. And you may sense from time to time what it's like to identify with the awareness of the thoughts. As Michael Singer, spiritual teacher, said, you are not the voice in your head. You're the one who's listening. So, a little Zen pop quiz. If you like, you can close your eyes. And for these next few moments, just try not to think. You may notice this is not so easy or even possible. So is it instead possible to watch the thoughts, to be the observer of the thoughts? To do this, you have to relax and sense what some call the witness or the observer. You are not the voices in your head. You are the one listening. And this brings up an interesting question. What is it that is listening? What is it that is aware right now? If you like, you can deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. If you are not your thoughts, but you're the one who is listening, it opens up a very, very interesting exploration. And what can happen in your practice, the more you deepen your practice, the more you begin to notice how thoughts fall into certain categories. You can sort of take different thought forms and put them in different buckets. Classically, they're referred to as the obstacles or the hindrances. These are the mental states that make it impossible to be present. One category is the wanting mind, all the thoughts associated with wanting, desire, fantasy, planning. Another bucket are all the thoughts that have to do with aversion, anger, judgment, hatred, blame, ill will. Another bucket is restlessness, the worried mind, hypervigilance. Another category is sloth and torpor, which are all the thoughts that have to do around numbing, kind of like the sinking quality of mind. And the fifth category has to do with doubt, which is also a quality of self-criticism, doubting yourself, doubting your choices, doubting life. As I like to say, the good news is there are only 5 categories. The bad news, they are incredibly nefarious. But what if it's possible to remember that you're not your thoughts, and you're the one who is listening, and you are the one with the capacity to identify when you are thinking, and maybe even to be able to categorize your thought as it's happening? Over time, in little bits and little glimpses, you may begin to sense who you are as awareness itself. Still thinking, but not constrained by the thoughts, not constrained by the beliefs. And beliefs, by the way, are simply thoughts that you thought 1,000 times that have kind of calcified. It becomes a very exciting part of practice. This whole sense of not being confined by your thoughts. Which leads to the next preconception of the next myth. A meditation is somehow, in some way, escaping reality. I can't not laugh when I hear this one. I challenge anyone who says that meditation is about escaping reality to do a week-long silent meditation retreat with no talking, no reading, and no eye contact. It's one of the hardest and maybe one of the most liberating things you can possibly do. To spend a week where it's just you and you. My very first 10-day meditation retreat, which was about 40 years ago or more, I began to recognize how completely deluded my mind is. It was a time in my life when I was in transition. I was trying to figure out what to do next. Do I leave the ashram and set out on my own? What would I do if I left? Do I stay? And I just watched my mind on fire. I have a flash of possibility, and I'd say, I'll go finish my PhD and I'll be a professor. And then I'd watch my mind get excited about this and kind of play it out. And then a little bit later, I'd feel a sense of deflation when I realized, oh, that's just a story. And then I thought, well, I'll get back on the road and I'll do a travel documentary. And I'd get excited and play that one out. And then again, a sense of deflation. And then I'll pursue the healing arts, which was a passion of mine at the time. And I'll open a practice with some friends and we'll have a healing clinic together. And then that one would fade. And on and on. And finally, I began to see the pattern. And what was underneath that pattern, which was basically, no surprise, the anxiety and the deep distrust around life. The sense that I'm not going to be okay. I have to figure this out and develop a plan now. That clutch of fear that was trying to simply control and predict what my life was going to be. A meditation practice, at least in the Vipassana tradition, is not optimistic. But it's not pessimistic either. It's realistic. It's about really exploring your relationship with reality. Stoicism is a kind of a back in fashion a little bit. And it's very, very similar to Buddhism in that it's a reality-based practice. Let's name what's real. Perhaps one of the most powerful illustrations is a woman who lost her son, a small baby, and she was absolutely distraught. And this is, again, the story goes back to the Buddhist time. And she had her son's body and was going from house to house. Who can heal my son? And she heard of the Buddha and went to the Buddha and said, you're this great healer. Bring my son back to life. And the Buddha said, find someone whose house has not been touched by death, and I will bring your son back to life. This gave her tremendous hope. And she went from house to house to house to house in desperation to bring her son back. And she realized there is no one whose life is not touched by death. That harsh experience of reality was liberating from two angles. First was the recognition of what is true, seeing clearly. No one escapes death. But the other element was compassion and empathy. As she talked with people about their losses, she recognized that she was not alone, she was not unique, and her heart opened. So a reality-based practice is about the awakening of clarity, but it's also about the awakening of heart. So, of course, the question becomes, then what is real? What is real? And here we have to take a couple leaps to try a couple things on. And a reflection that I always find helpful, and I'll share with you briefly, is a reflection on what are considered the three characteristics of reality. When I first heard this, I thought, here are the three characteristics of reality. I thought, wow, okay, what are they? So let's try these on. Very, very short meditation. Again, if you like, you can close your eyes. If you prefer not to, don't. The first characteristic of reality is referred to as anicca, or impermanence. You might take a moment and notice what's changing. And explore now, if you like, this following question. Is there anything in your experience right now that does not change? The second characteristic is referred to as dukkha, which is translated roughly as dissatisfaction, unsteadiness, stress, sometimes as suffering. And just notice that if you fixate on one thing, that it will change, and there's a certain unsteadiness to it. This unsteadiness or stress or dissatisfaction comes from clinging, from grasping, from holding on to something that can't be held on to. And conversely, if you hold on to nothing, and you might explore this right now, if you hold on to nothing right now, what does that feel like inside? The third characteristic of reality is referred to as anatta, which is related to this nature of the self, to who you are. Who you are is constantly changing on one level, but perhaps there is a quality of the self, that who you are, that is unchanging. In the absence of grasping, in the absence of wanting, in the absence of judgment and blame, you might sense of just for a moment the possibility of this quality of self that is open and spacious and allowing. These three characteristics of reality become a very helpful guide to remember everything changes. Whatever you hold on to will result in some form of rope burn, and that who you are is this element of anything that can change, but also a quality of unchanging awareness. If you like, you can deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. A reality-based practice is not necessarily for the faint of heart. At least the transformational aspect of the practice more than just calming the mind now and then, but becoming more and more intimately in contact with reality. Well, this practice is guaranteed to reveal anything that's undigested, anything that's unseen, anything that's unfelt in your life. When you practice with diligence and with sincerity, old wounds will come to the surface. All of your conditioning, any experiences of fear and helplessness and trauma, all of this will start to surface. I did a month-long retreat. I think it was my second month-long retreat, and going very, very deep into kind of just relaxed presence. And I was having these experiences of just flinching, as if someone was about to hit me. I don't know. I could not predict where it came from. And I recognized that this was just my body releasing stress, releasing whatever memories were there. Didn't know any content. And then I know in Transcendental Meditation, they actually call this practice of de-stressing. It's your body just sort of throwing off old stress. So being a reality-based practice, there are some contraindications. There are things to be aware of. If you have a lot of trauma, if hypervigilance is kind of a normal state for you, you want to tread lightly. Make sure you have support. If there are strong emotions that arise, it's very, very helpful to recognize them when they're there and then to ask, can I be with it? Because you may not be able to. You may not have the firepower, the energy. It might be too much. You might get flooded. It's so, so helpful in your practice to ask for support. Learning to work with difficult emotions and sensations is a critical part of practice. Because again, if you want to be free, you will be treated to the experience of everything that's not free, everything that's bound up in your life. And more on that on another talk. But this practice is not about emptying the mind. It's about being aware of the mind. Which leads to the final question. How do we be aware? There are lots of opinions on this, which leads to the final myth I'd like to chat about in the remaining minutes I have left. This idea that there's one technique that does it all. Again, can't help but smile. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're sitting in meditation. I had a very profound experience on a retreat, and suddenly I became disoriented, really disoriented. I thought, what am I supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to relax? Am I supposed to concentrate? Am I supposed to watch? Am I supposed to let things be? Am I supposed to bring compassion? What am I supposed to do right now? And this really points toward a really important part of meditation. And that is realizing that you're developing skillful means. I learned TM when I was 15. I did it intensively for a couple decades. I was not curious about other techniques. I didn't even know there were other techniques. When I said I'm doing meditation, I thought all techniques were the technique that I was doing. And it really points towards something that when you wanted to learn meditation, for example, back in history, you would learn from whoever was local to you. So it's so helpful to explore this myriad of different techniques and practices out there. The classic question is, what's the best technique? I remember someone asked my teacher, I said, look, I'm a busy guy. If I'm going to be practicing, I want to know what the best technique is. I'm not wasting my time. My teacher said, the best technique, it's the one you do on a regular basis. A lot of wisdom in that. And what I have found is wherever you start in your practice, trust that your practice will evolve. Many, many years ago, back in the yoga center where I lived, I was doing a lot of PR, and I was contacted by a, um, a writer who said, looking for a reaction to a quote. And she said, are you aware that Donna Karan has just come out with a $300 yoga mat bag? Any response? I knew the response she wanted. And I said, I think it's great. I said, if a $300 yoga mat bag gets someone practicing, their life is going to transform. But you will find, if you haven't already, and I imagine you have already, that there are many, many different traditions. One tradition will say, meditate like your hair is on fire. Die on the cushion. Bring yourself intensively with all rigor to the present moment. Another tradition on the other end of the spectrum will say, you know what the problem is? Effort. You're trying. Just relax. It's already here. So the question becomes, how does your moment want you to be with it? And I find this to be one of the really helpful inquiries in my own practice, to ask myself from time to time, how does this moment want me to be with it right now? So you might try this on. If you like, Zen Pop Quiz, 30 seconds. You can close your eyes. Take a nice, long, deep breath. And just sense, what is the quality of presence in your life right now? What are you feeling right now? Is there a sense of how this moment wants you to be with it? Would it be helpful to use some willpower to bring yourself more right here and right now? Would it be helpful to let your awareness expand and sort of see this as part of a flow of phenomena passing through? Would it be helpful to call on some compassion and empathy? Would it be helpful to explore more intimately into what's happening and how you're relating to it? Would it be helpful to explore just letting it be? There's a statement the Buddha made, and you can open your eyes if you feel free, that kind of riveted me. And again, who knows what's attributed, what the Buddha actually said, but one of the statements was, you must take responsibility for your own awakening. No one's going to save you. Whew. Just think about that. You have to take responsibility for your own awakening. No one is going to save you. I spent a lot of years thinking someone was going to save me. And so the question becomes, what is the path that calls you? Your practice will evolve and change. I promise you. I found it very, very helpful for myself to do lots of concentration practice. I found it incredibly powerful to focus on holding things in loving awareness and seeing how they transform. I found it very, very helpful to the sense of cultivating the observer, to notice what's changing. I found it incredibly helpful to let go of all effort and see what happens. And at different times, these different skillful means will be very, very helpful in your practice. But ultimately, we get attached to a path. We get attached to a tradition. And I thought I would close with this short reading from Carlos Castaneda. You might think of all the different traditions and paths and all the routes you've gone down in your own exploration in your life. And this might be helpful. Here's what this says. You must always keep in mind that a path is only a path. Each path is only one of a million paths. If you feel that you must now follow it, you need not stay with it under any circumstances. Any path is only a path. There is no affront to yourself or others in dropping a path if that's what your heart tells you to do. But your decision to keep on must be a path, or to leave it must be free of fear and ambition. I caution you, look at every path closely and deliberately. Try it as many times as you think necessary. Then ask yourself and yourself alone this one question. Does this path have a heart? All paths are the same. They lead nowhere. They are paths going through the brush or into the brush or under the brush of the universe. The only question is, does this path have a heart? If it doesn't, then it is of no use. If it does, then it is a good path. This idea of taking responsibility for our own awakening is a tremendous amount of responsibility. It's, in my mind, so important to explore different paths and different traditions, to find what really, truly resonates for you. And in my experience, you will be drawn to certain practices that will cultivate certain qualities of your awareness, your mind, your consciousness, and that will shift and move according to your own life, your own development, your karma, if you will. But it's helpful to remember that this practice is not a quick fix. It's not about emptying the mind. It's not a way to escape reality. And this is a path of awakening, a path of coming into contact with reality and trusting that you will be guided if you keep coming back to a sincere heart, if you keep opening to this question of, does this path have heart? Trusting that you will be guided. I hope this has been helpful for you in some way. What a treat to be able to share these practices and these teachings with you and to be sharing the journey. I so wish you well, and I look forward to being with you again.